What's up, guys? ThyrixSyx back again with another DeckTech, this time a Puresteel Knights deck in Modern, as well as another type of DeckTech to go over. Let's get to it. This type of DeckTech will show no actual footage and be short and to the point of the main points of the deck. As mentioned, the deck revolves around Puresteel Paladin and Knight synergy, and therefore is relegated mostly to FM level success. The deck is fun and casual, while still being a solid deck for trips to the shop, though. For the next creatures, we have 4 Student of Warfare as our only 1-drop knight. Having a beater that we can pump over time is great, but there is a turn 1 play that we'd much rather prefer. It goes without saying that we run 4 Puresteel Paladins, as it is the namesake of the deck. He turns our equipment card value into greater card advantage and can move around weapons post-combat for great security. Sadly, he is the weakest of the knights in combat thanks to his lack of first strike, and should be only placed in the red zone after very thorough consideration. Rounding out the 2-drop creatures, we have Knight of the White Orchid as a 3-of. When on the draw, he can get you ahead on lands by playing him before your land per turn. Flower Knight also has a great interaction with Aether Vial and Flagstones of Trocaire, where if you respond to the land trigger, you can vial him in and get 2 lands. He also lowers the drawback on path of your opponents being able to fetch a land. Although land thinning has been shown statistically insignificant, Flower Knight plus Flagstones of Trocaire will usually take a couple of lands out of your deck, which is pretty fine value to me. Starting off the 3-drop slot, we have 4 Knight Exemplars, the lord of our knights. She makes our creatures even better in combat, even without swords, and provides protection from sweepers. Flashing with Aether Vial, Exemplar can waste an opponent's removal spell, or Wrath, or completely turn the tide of combat with the element of surprise. With 2 out on the field, all of your knights are unkillable and will dominate the red zone. The power hitter of this deck is, unsurprisingly, Mirror Crusader. Played as a 4-of, his built-in protections and double strike make him a force to be reckoned with, whether or not he is carrying a sword or being buffed by Knight Exemplar. Ending the creature category with more of a utility card is Phyrexian Metamorph, played as a 2-of. In a flash, this blob of completed Quicksilver can become a new sword, a second Knight Exemplar for the lock, or a beater either from your board or your opponent's. The loss of 2 life is definitely worth the utility that this card brings. Since this deck is artifact-based, but still is a creature deck, Aether Vial is fantastic and is played as a set. This great card adds to Metalcraft, makes creatures uncounterable, and gives a lot of tricks to your creatures. Usually, having multiple copies is pretty lame, but since this deck wants to use its mana on swords, and likes to have more artifacts on the board, the downsides of Vial are somewhat lessened. The first 2 weapons we have are Basilisk Collar and Silver Inlaid Dagger, both as 2-ofs. They are both cheap equipment that can cycle well with Paladin and make combat a nightmare for the opponent. In a race, the collar can be a blessing with a life gain and first strike, guaranteed to kill a creature in combat. Against a slower deck, the dagger will put them on a very fast clock that will have them shaking in their boots. Their Trailblazers boots. No? I should stop making jokes? I'm not funny? I see. Let's move on! Rounding out the arsenal, we have 4 Swords of Protection value: Feast and Famine, Fire and Ice, Light and Shadow, and War and Peace. The reason I'm running a variety and not just the best is that, if needed, I can fetch the one I need, and this way it's honestly just more fun. There isn't all too much to say about the swords that isn't already known. The protection they offer is great in and out of combat, and the value they give when connecting will almost ensure your victory. You'll also get a kick out of suiting up a Crusader with one of these. Starting off the instants and sorceries, we have 2 Steel Shaper's Gifts to fetch any weapon that you might need at the time, be it any of the Swords of Protection, or just a 1-drop equipment that you need to draw a card from. The last 5 spell slots are relegated to removal, 4 Path to Exile and 1 Dispatch. Path is regarded as one of the best removal spells in Modern, and this deck uses it pretty well. The reason we don't play more Dispatches over Paths is because, although it may be better at times, sometimes it just taps a guy, and we need great all the time, not the best some of the time. Last but not least, we have lands, of which we only run 20. Because of Aether Vial and low CMC level, and moderate land searching from Flower Knight, this number has been fine in testing. We run 3 Caverns as an additional way to make our knights uncounterable. It can also be set to Shapeshifter if needed, and allow you to save some life and have an uncounterable clone. 3 Darksteel Citadel also show up in our mana-based memories as an addition to the Metalcraft count, and randomly important in Indestructible Land. Not sure how often that'll come up, but it might. 1 Mutavault rounds out our colorless lands, and can serve as an extra body to enter the red zone if needed. It also gets buffed by a Knight Exemplar. Now, we do run a decent number of colorless lands, but thanks to the amount of colorless equipment spells, it's been pretty fine for me. A recent addition has been 4 Flagstones of Trocare that can help thin your deck and has a nice interaction, as stated before, with Flower Knight. The last 9 slots belong to Plains. Yeah, just Plains. It's a mono white deck. It's Plains. Transition! In the sideboard, we have 3 Aethersworn Canonists for the Storm and Control matchups. It's also a nice artifact for Metalcraft. For graveyard-based decks, we have 1 Rest in Peace and 1 Relic of Progenitus, which happens to be a nice artifact for Metalcraft. We use 2 Kataki War's Wage for the Robot/Affinity match, and while he can make us use mana, we should have Vial and hopefully free equips, so it usually is fine. There's also 1 Phyrexian Revoker for random walkers and other such things you might encounter, and it's a nice artifact for Metalcraft. We also have 1 Ghostly Prison for the FNM aggro decks, and 2 Leyline of Sanctity for the burn and mill decks that you might encounter at the FNM level. The 2 Oblivion Rings in the sideboard usually help fight things that you just aren't expecting in your matchups. And lastly, we have 2 Wrath of Gods for the aggro matchups, and have fun casting them when you have the Exemplar locked down. So guys, that was yet another deck tech by me. Tell me how you like about the new setup, and this was also my first scripted video. I'm not sure how much I liked it. I had a lot of reshoots because I didn't like anything I said. This part's not scripted because YOLO, right? So tell me what you guys thought about the video. Leave a comment, subscribe if you want. I don't really give a damn. Well, I do. Love me.